Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this series of interviews. My name is Jorge Silva-Puras. I'm the Dean at the CUNY School of Professional Studies. And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Anthony Picciano, who is an institution at CUNY. We were discussing earlier his wealth of knowledge about how CUNY has evolved, and particularly in the last few years, how AI has been an interest of Tony. Can I call you Tony or Anthony? What do you prefer?
Either way is fine.
Excellent. So, Tony, welcome to this interview. It's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you for the invitation. It's very kind of you.
Excellent. And as always, we like to start by getting a little bit of a perspective on our interviewees. So, if you can tell and share a little bit of your story, how you got into CUNY, how long have you been here, and more importantly, what are you doing now, and what's your passion in the last few years?
Thank you. My first introduction to CUNY was in 1967 as a student at Hunter College. Actually, that's when I started full time at Hunter. I had rolled part time in the evening. I was working in a bank during the day, and that's where I learned how to do computer programming. At the time, that was this brand new technology that very few people knew anything about. Anyhow, I decided to go to Hunter College in the Bronx, and they established their first computer center, and I found myself working in there in 1967, 68 as a student aide. And I was, one of the things I remember is that I was this young person of about 19, 20 years old, and I was in this center with scientists and physicists and mathematicians, and I realized I knew more about computer programming than they did, and I kept that to myself. In any case, they offered me a full-time position in January 1970, and I must say that I've never left CUNY. I'm a product of CUNY, someone who worked and had to work, to be quite honest with you. And go to school in the evening. And the students we have now, it's the same thing. I mean, it doesn't matter what level I've taught. I've been an adjunct at BMCC. I've taught at Hunter and Staten Island, and I've taught at the Graduate Center. All of the students to me are very similar. They put together incredibly busy days as working, taking care of families and getting their higher education. And they inspire me every time I work with them. At any level.
And currently you are at Hunter, correct?
Right now I'm at Hunter, and I'm also on the faculty at the Graduate Center. And I'm working with 5 doctoral students at the Graduate Center. I'm teaching 2 graduate courses. At Hunter, we have a new program, an EDD program in education leadership or instructional leadership, where I'm teaching there. So I'm teaching 2 courses. And I have 5 doctoral students, and I'm taking my first sabbatical next year. In 53 years.
First sabbatical, 53 years. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Long time coming. So, so you're teaching several courses at both undergrad or at this point.
Yeah, I am, and but I keep my contacts with different people around the university. I mean, I worked at Hunter, Lehman, Staten Island, Graduate Center. I even was at the School of Professional Studies for a while, and was among the faculty who helped develop the first fully online BA program that CUNY ever offered. So I'm proud of all that, and I'm proud of all the associations I have. It's been a wonderful group of people that I've had the pleasure of working with over these years.
So that's an excellent segue to maybe talk a little bit about the evolution of online teaching and learning at CUNY. Over the last, say, 15, 20 years, you probably have been, as you just mentioned, involved in some aspects or many aspects of it. Can you tell us where we are at CUNY and what you envision will be the future in the upcoming years?
Okay.
CUNY Online.
In the early 90s, I was doing multimedia work with the technology. One of our programs called 5 Points which had to do with the Irish immigration in New York City in the 1850s, received a lot of accolades back then, given the limitation of the technology back then. But I think what our audience might be more interested in is 1996. I started teaching fully online at Hunter College in a graduate program. I was fortunate that I just hit, my timing was perfect in terms of approaching the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation for some grant money. They were funding online technology at the time, and almost all of all of the colleges and universities they had funded before that were schools that had long histories of distance education, like the Penn State Rural Campus, the University of Maryland, University College, etc. And I was the first application they ever received from an institution that had no background in distance education. And my justification was that for my students, it wasn't geography, it was time. And that I wrote this whole grant proposal on the importance of online technology for busy urban professionals. And that struck a chord with them. They liked it a lot. And actually, they continued to fund my work from 1997 through 2013. And I'm very and at that point, they stopped funding any programs in higher ed. In any case, in the late 90s, working with people like Colette Wagner and later George Oddie, we developed actually the first CUNY Online, which I'm glad to see the name came back over the last few years with our new chancellor. But back then, it was more a professional development program. We received the funding from the Sloan Foundation. We bought our first Blackboard programs from grant money, and at the time, the central office was minimally involved, and they really encouraged us. Well, buy it as long as you got funding. Buy it for each college, and the first couple of years, we bought basically the Blackboard software, and each college could implement it if they wanted. A year or two later, the central office realized that wasn't the most efficient way to go, so we then ended up with the new central server and what have you. But we did a lot of professional development back then. I know that one year Colette Wagner, who organized it, she did someone in the central administration asked for some recap on that, and she estimated that we had over 2,000 faculty attending our sessions over the course of a year. And I'm very proud of that. And the chancellor back then was an interim chancellor. It was actually Christoph Kimmich. And he wrote me a personal letter, basically a personal email, thanking me for what I was doing. And he was the one who I think shepherded most of our. It was his endorsement that helped us continue to get grant funds. Sure. From there, we had to develop policies. I chaired a committee of faculty and PSC representatives and central line faculty. We developed a policy on how we could proceed with this new, quote unquote, if you want to use the term, distance education technology. And I'm very proud of that work also. And I think some of the work we did there, particularly in terms of copyright and what have you, and faculty ownership, it's still that has evolved to where our policies are now in CUNY. And I'm so proud of the work that has gone in CUNY. And I would say the School of Professional Studies was something special. To be able to develop fully online programs, we had to go outside the regular college structure to do that. And I think we did it well, both technologically and politically, keeping in mind, collective bargaining, and which is a significant aspect of our life in CUNY. But I'm so proud of where the School of Professional Studies has come. I mean, they seem to get any accolade that anyone wants to offer in terms of the quality of the programs. And I'm proud to say I was one of the early people involved with. There was about maybe 5 or 6 of us. George Oddie, I'm sure.
Of course, and George is still
working with you. But George was he remembers. I mean, we were about 6 or 7 faculty. We used to meet at 6 o'clock in the morning to do our work because we had You couldn't do it in an hour meeting or even 2 hour meetings. These were 3 and 4 hour meetings that, trying to develop, for instance, let's say the general ed requirements for a BA program, and you don't have any faculty except the 5 or 6 of us. So anyhow, I'm very proud of what's happened in the School of Professional Studies.
So by the way, what some of those gen ed courses are now being utilized across the system. So
I'm sure.
This is a work product that has been in the making for almost 2 decades, and right. It is expanding widely across the system. So let's fast forward to the events of, say, the last few years.
Okay.
Particularly as it relates to the new technology that everyone seems to be talking about in higher education, which is artificial intelligence. So you have written about AI since its very beginning. As a matter of fact, I believe that there are several articles. I'm going to show one of them on the screen, which is the most recent that you wrote in April of this year, that compares 2 different types of AIs, the ChatGPT and Google's Bard. I will also include this link to the comments on the video after we're done with the live version. But tell us a little bit about the evolution of AI. I know your first paper on the topic was a few years back. So maybe we can share a little bit of that story, and then we'll take it one step at a time until we get to where we are today.
Okay. Well, I continue to work with various CUNY offices and administrators in terms of promoting the benefits of online technology for our students all through the, let's say, the teens. But by then it was becoming almost commonplace, and I was kind of proud to see how it evolved. And actually, I spent 10 years as the executive officer of a PhD program, which I helped develop at the Graduate Center in Urban Education, which is I think it's one of the best programs of the PhD programs in the Graduate Center today. But what was good about it was we were preparing students to be college professors and what have you. And I was happy to make sure that they had a good dose of technology and where it was going. But I always followed the technology. I helped start the Online Learning Consortium, which continues today. That was that succeeded the Sloan Consortium. And what was great about that, we started that around 1997, 96. We did our first journal. But it put me in touch with people around the world, but mainly around the country, who had deep experiences with developing online technology. And I must say, I listened carefully, and I was always the voice of the person who was in the urban school, so to speak. And I must say that as the technology has evolved, I think it was going on a very nice gradual evolution. But then we started hearing about artificial intelligence. And I would say up until a couple of years ago, if that long, it was only being followed by some of us who had a hand in technology. But I started talking and writing about it a good 7 years ago. And I had grave concerns about how it would evolve and who was going to control this technology. And I still have that concern. And I think ChatGPT all of a sudden came on the scene last fall, and it was a wake-up call, not just for higher ed, but for the entire society in terms of what this new technology could bring. And I think there are things that are positive about it, but there's also things that could be problematic. And we have no policies nationally. We have no policies in higher education. Individual colleges are trying to figure it out. I know right now I have about a dozen graduate students who are exploring how they would use ChatGPT and or Bard in their classes, and almost all of them teach in the New York City public schools. And I'm finding it's all of a sudden, it is like what online learning was in the late 90s, this new thing. How do you teach online? I know I used to be teased by a couple of my colleagues, and they said, well, Tony, what do? You're teaching your pajamas? I said, well, to be quite honest with you, I don't wear pajamas. But any case, and now we're finding the same thing is happening with AI, that up until ChatGPT came on the scene, it was one of those things that there was handfuls of people here, there, and wherever kind of following it. But now everybody's following it and everyone is concerned. And I think that I think we should be concerned, to be
So
quite.
why don't we, for purposes of the discussion, why don't we separate the discussion into two areas? One,
Okay.
what are in your mind, the advantages and the possibilities that AI, ChatGPT, BARD, and others bring to higher education? And then we'll discuss the concerns and the potential threats that AI represents. So let's start with the positive. On the positive side, what do you see are the main benefits that this technology is bringing to us in higher ed?
Well, I think the technology, there's a sophistication about it that will allow, I think, major changes in the way we do counseling, for instance, and advisement. I think there are some good programs that have been developed that take, let's say, I would say, the routine aspects of advisement and counseling and put it into an AI application. And I think it does that very, very well, to be quite honest with you. No offense to my counselor and advisor friends, but I think it reserves for the advisors and the counselors the real more serious issues that our students bring to them, financial issues and family issues. I don't know that the AI programs do that very well, but in terms of the curricula issues, I think some of the AI programs I've seen, and there's a very good one developed at Georgia Tech that I think does that work very well. In terms of teaching and learning,
you're talking, for example, say I'm a student, I'm considering doing a BA in, let's say, psychology, that the AI might be able to suggest which are the right courses I should take, in which order, which are the prerequisites. That type of counseling is what you're referring to.
Absolutely, correct? That's what I'm referring to. The technical counseling. I think that the AI programs can do that very, very well. I think our colleagues at Lehman developed one or something similar to that, and I congratulate them for doing it.
I also saw recently, Tony, a video from Sal Khan, the founder of Khan Academy. They just launched an AI-powered tutor for the students who take Khan Academy courses. And I must say, particularly the demo he showed on math courses was pretty impressive. The way that it helps the student, not with the answer, but for the student to think about how to get to the correct answer. So very powerful. I think tutoring can also be significantly benefit significantly from the technology.
I would agree with you fully, and I think we're just seeing it now being introduced on the pedagogical side, and I think we're experimenting with it. But I know after again, I have a dozen graduate students. I have had them do several writing assignments. They are encouraged to use ChatGPT and/or BARD, and I'm asking them to evaluate what their experiences are. And these are mature students. They are all educators in New York City schools, so they know a lot about pedagogy. Let me assure you, probably more than any of our faculty, because they're teaching 5 days a week, 8:30 to 3 o'clock, and the feedback I'm getting from them is remarkable. I think all but one are looking forward to try and integrate it into their teaching and learning. And where it's really interesting. I would expect high school teachers could do this, but I'm even getting students who are teaching in the lower grades trying to figure out how to integrate this in their teaching and instruction.
Of course, and another interesting area in which AI can help, not only in higher education but in many sectors, is in terms of the productivity of us as instructors and teachers.
Yes.
But also in our daily events. There's a lot of effort that we do or used to do fairly manually. and now we can delegate some of that to AI. So
I think that's true. I think the other area that, and this might segue into a concern, and if it does, we can come back to it, but there's going to be incredible efficiencies in using AI applications with super cloud computer applications. And I'm concerned that we're going to see a certain amount of efficiencies in how we can do our work, particularly in the large public systems and I'm afraid that while there will be efficiencies to begin with, I am afraid that down the road we might see some consolidations, as is going on in places like Connecticut and Wisconsin and Alaska now,
yeah,
where
as well, and all over the nation, really.
yep, yep.
So this might be a good segue to discuss the potential threats of this technology.
Okay. Well, I think that the threats are not just higher ed. Matter of fact, I was interviewed about 2 or 3 weeks ago by a reporter who was doing a little article in some technical journal and what have you, and she was asking me about the effects of AI on higher ed, and I said that it has the potential of changing a lot of how we teach and a lot of how our students learn. And she asked me some probing questions, which were good. There was always the concern about plagiarism. And I think that is a concern. But if you tell your students, just cite whatever you get from ChatGPT or Bard, at least I'm finding that at the beginning with my students, that they are doing that, and I'm fine with it. But down the road, I would be really concerned about, how papers will be developed, that they might have many papers that we all write, our faculty, whether it's, research or whatnot. I could see the introductions for a lot of papers being generated by ChatGPT or Bard. I can see reviews of the literature being generated by them. Anyhow, my last comment to this reporter, and I said, and I thanked her for reaching out to me. I said, and actually, I think the profession that I would be most concerned about are people who write for journals and for newspapers, and if you look at the strike that's going on in Hollywood right now with the writers, the TV writers, one of their demands is to put some restrictions on artificial intelligence. I think that's well placed. So I do think there are some concerns there. If I had to say also the concern, and you can go out to my website, there was a really very good interview about 2 weeks ago. It appeared in several journals, but it was with Jeffrey Hinton. And if anyone knows him, he's been one of the gurus at Google for decades.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. In AI, he knows AI very, very well. And he just resigned. Yeah. I'm sorry?
He just quit Google, correct?
He just resigned, and his reason was basically so that he could speak freely his own mind without representing Google about where AI is going. And he's most concerned, and it was a very extensive interview, but his greatest concern is who's going to control it. And he says, with the profit motive that drives many of our corporations, there are no ways to control it. People will do what they want with it. And if I can quote from Elon Musk, which he referred to, I believe, in the article. And when we think about Elon Musk, put Twitter aside, he's done a lot of, I think, interesting technological work in our world. But he was asked about this, and he's been on a little bit of a drumbeat in terms of being careful, but with AI. But he expressed the same thing that Jeffrey Hinton expressed. And if I could put it in a simple quote, he says, AI is great when the emperor is Marcus Aurelius. It's not so great when the emperor is Caligula. And that is very, very true. We have no way of controlling who's going to develop this. We have lots of organizations that have called for controls and have called for standards, but none of them have any particular power or clout with the overall AI community that are developing the software.
Yeah, so and the reality is that we are in an equivalent of an arms race, right, between Google
absolutely. Google
OpenAI.
and Microsoft and OpenAI. I mean, there's a lot of, and there's some that are United States based. There's some that are not United States based. As I understand it, there are like 7 or 8 major companies with assets of billions of dollars that are considered the main leaders in AI development. 3 of them are in China. 4 are in the United States.
Correct. And the reality is that, as we well know, technology evolves at a pace that regulators and legislators rarely can keep up with. So the laws and the regulations will take much longer. At some point, I think that's going to be the only potential solution. There is a movement to stop development on AI for a 6-month period. I don't know if you have heard of the famous
Yep.
letter that is running, that's circulating about taking a pause until we
Right.
can figure out. But without regulation and be completely voluntary process, I doubt that's going to go too far. But
I
again,
agree
that
with you.
regulation.
I agree with you fully. There's not going to be any kind of regulation implemented, particularly at the national level, that will control that. And we have no control over the international level. So I
Right.
don't think that, I mean, they could call for pauses, but I don't know that it has any clout at all, as you just articulated.
Now let's talk specifically in the last few minutes we have left of the interview about the differences that you have identified between OpenAI's ChatGPT and Google's Bard. Again, I'm
Okay.
going to put on the screen. I'm going to show the article that you wrote. But if you can summarize, highlight for us, what are the main differences between those two? I think that would be helpful for our audience.
Okay. Well, the blog posting that you're referring to really refers extensively to an article that Eric Afghan, who's the senior writer for Tech and Learning, did about a month or so ago, and he tried different scenarios with ChatGPT and Bard, and he basically says that they are very similar, but that how they handle certain questions will be different. And if we think about it, we can put almost any question we want into any of these, either of these 2 generative AI applications, and how we word our questions might be different. We can get different answers. But let me give you a couple of his comments. He had basically asked both ChatGPT and Bard to do a book report on To Kill a Mockingbird.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically gave the nod to ChatGPT plus, and he felt that it was a more extensive did a more extensive task, and it was deep and inspiring. Were his quote, I can quote from him. He also put in a science question to explain black holes. In that respect, he thought Bard did a much better job of it than ChatGPT. And lastly, and I replicated this, he put in a math question, a rather simple equation, which I didn't think was very, very challenging. He said it was a tie. I subsequently put in a question to the 2, ChatGPT and Bard, and asked him to explain the differences between linear regression and logical regression, if any of you are familiar with statistics. And I would have rated it a tie in how they came back. But if I have the time, I would like to just maybe give you a quick quote from one of my students.
Sure.
Who, if we have the time, who just wrote this to me a couple of weeks ago, and she was doing a project. If you're familiar with the 1619 project by Nicole Hannah Jones, she's looking to maybe implement it. As a matter of fact, the assignment was how you would implement this in your classes. And she used ChatGPT and Bard, and she compared the 2. She felt that they had similar answers. I'm reading exactly from her, that both ChatGPT and Bard were able to summarize the basic premise of the 1619 project and provide some clear, tangible ways it could be used in a fourth grade classroom that were age appropriate. And she goes on asking them about whether it was slightly controversial, other than just a simple, straightforward question. She basically asked a question that had to do with whether it was controversial. And she's found significant differences between ChatGPT and Bard. ChatGPT tried to remain more neutral on the topic, while Bard's response seemed to show a little more opinion. And Bard's response indicated more support for the 1619 project. She did a presentation in my class last night, and she reviewed what I just read to you. And she indicated she felt that in that particular assignment, that ChatGPT was more robotic. That was her name. That was her word. And that Bard was more, quote unquote, human-like.
So it seems like Google is already making adjustments to Bard.
Absolutely.
And I would imagine these are changes that are happening on a daily or weekly basis at both companies.
Absolutely.
Plus the other ones that you mentioned outside of the US. So we definitely need to pay close attention to how this technology evolves. I'm sure, as I said at the beginning, if we have this conversation a few months from now, the panorama will be quite different. So at this point, it seems fair to say that academics and non-academics are using both platforms. They're testing what works better for one versus the other. The jury's still out in terms of which is better for which uses. But Tony, I would really like to have you back on this interview series at some point later in the summer to explore how between today, May 9th, and a couple of months from now, the evolution of the technology has taken potentially new turns and new twists. So with that, I would like to give you the opportunity to share your contact info. If there's a preference, where would you like people to reach out to you? I would imagine your blog is probably the best one.
The blog is there. My website, anthonypicciano.com. There's all kinds of material there, and people are free to email me. The email address I use most is apicciano@gc.cuny.edu. So feel free to email me. And
through your website, the one I'm showing right now, the contact information is there as well.
Yes. Yep.
Picciano.com.
Yep. Yeah, it's there. And there's a lot of material there. I mean, over the years, I developed something like 20 videos on descriptive statistics that I find people download and still download and what have you on a regular basis. I use them in my classes, but there's a lot of material there. And I want to really thank you, Dean, for Dean Silva-Puras for this invitation. It was very kind of you, and I think this is a wonderful series and a wonderful service you're providing for our CUNY colleagues.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to that follow-up interview. So thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day, and to our audience, stay tuned. We will have follow-up sessions on AI, on ChatGPT, on Bard, and whatever else comes up in the next few months. Because I'm sure, again, this is a race, and as with all very competitive areas, there will be more companies coming to the public soon. So again, thank you, and look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.